My earliest childhood memory was when I was 2 years old. And I had this memory my whole life, never really told anybody about it, and didn't really understand it. When I was 2, I have this memory of walking in a room, a big room. It was very bright white, and I was a toddler, and I was just wearing a diaper, nothing else. I was barefoot, and I was just walking. I didn't really know where I was or anything, and I saw other people there walking with me, and everybody seemed to be going in one direction. And I kept walking, and then I came up to some steps, and the floor looked like white marble. The steps looked like white marble. The room, it seemed to be kind of an oval shape, but I couldn't really see walls or a door or windows. It was just very, very bright white. And kind of in the background too, there was kind of a mist. And I think I couldn't see a lot of definition about the inside of this place because of this mist and the bright white light that was in there. And so when I came up to the steps, I looked up and I saw 2 men sitting on big white thrones. And they were identical thrones. They were very kind of square and very angular. They looked like they had been cut out of pure white marble. They were both identically the same. And to my right, in front of me, a man was sitting on one of the thrones. He wasn't really looking at me. He was looking at other people that were walking and coming before the thrones. And he had a dark beard and dark hair, was wearing a long robe, and he was kind of looking over to his left. And then there was another man sitting on the other throne who was wearing a white robe, and he had shoulder length, lighter brown hair and a lighter brown beard, and he was looking directly at me. And I came up to the steps there, and I didn't go up to the steps. And the man who I looked at and I believe was Jesus said to me that I could not stay there. And he spoke telepathically, not with audible words out of the mouth, but he spoke telepathically to me, and he told me that I could not stay there and that I had to go. And I remember very distinctly feeling very sad about that, and I didn't want to go. I don't remember communicating to Jesus with my mouth or anything that I didn't want to go back, but I felt that very strongly, and I believe Jesus knew that as well. And he stood up and he pointed to his right, and he pointed the way for me to go out and go back, and he told me to go. So I just turned to my left the way he pointed and started walking out. You know, at that time too, when I was there, I don't remember feeling like I came from Earth, or I did not know that I had died. I really didn't have any thought of Earth or my parents or my brothers or anything. I just wanted to stay there. I wanted to stay in that place. I felt like that's where I was supposed to be. So this was my memory that I had my whole life, thought about it every single day, never told a single soul about it, because I just couldn't verbalize it. I couldn't understand it. And as I, got older and got more religious training, you know, I knew who I saw. I knew that from the minute I was there. But as I grew older and learned about God and Jesus, and there were some things that, because of my Catholic upbringing later on in my childhood, that made me not want to tell anybody about this, because I was always told, oh, no man has seen the face of God and lived. And that's not true. I really believed that no one would believe me. Nobody would get it. And I also thought I was the only person in the entire world that had ever experienced this or saw this. And I just knew no one would believe me. They would think I was crazy, and nobody would understand for sure, even if I did tell them. So I just carried this memory with me my whole life, not really understanding it. And when I was in my 40s, I had known since I was maybe a late teenager or early 20s that something happened to me when I was 2. I was very sick. And the relatives in my family and my parents, they never told me the full details of what happened to me and really why I was so sick. And I didn't really ask that much because I didn't remember a thing. And they, you know, I knew that I had hepatitis. They didn't know how I got it. And I knew I was very sick. My dad told me that they had to tie me down in my crib. The doctors told them to do that. And they said I was very sick and with this hepatitis, didn't know how I got it. So that was all I really knew from my parents and my other relatives. Well, when I was about in my 40s, I was having a conversation with my mother, and she told me this story that I had never heard before when I was really sick. And she said, my dad was a police officer, and his way of dealing with this, because the doctors said, you know, I was very sick, I was going to die, to just take me home, make me comfortable, and there was nothing that they could do for me. I was completely yellow with a big swollen belly, couldn't eat, couldn't drink, very lethargic, very weak. And so the way that my mom took me home, and the way that my dad chose to deal with this was he just worked a lot. He worked the graveyard shift, and he stayed gone working because he couldn't handle me dying, me being that sick. So when my mother brought me home and she was told that I was dying, she called the Carmelite nuns, which down in Southern California where we lived was an order of nuns that was well known for having a healing ministry. They prayed for the sick and they would be healed. So my mother called the Carmelite nuns and asked them, please pray for my daughter. She's very sick. She's dying. The doctor said she's going to die. Please pray for her to be healed. So they did. And one night, my mom told me that she was holding me and rocking me in the middle of the night. And all of a sudden, I just went limp and stopped breathing. And at that moment, she was terrified. She shook me and she just cried out to God and said, please don't take her. Don't take my baby. Don't take her. And after that, I kind of started breathing more. And although I was still very lethargic and very sick, she still thought I was going to die, and she just couldn't bear it. And so she just laid me down in my crib and left the room, shut the door. She thought for sure she would come back in the morning and find me dead. So the next morning she woke up and she went to my room. The door was shut, and she heard me in my crib talking and playing. And she opened the door, and I was sitting up in my crib, and she said I was not yellow at all. My belly wasn't swollen. I looked completely normal. I looked like I had been healed. And she got me out of my crib. I ate, I drank just like normal. She knew it was a miracle. And she took me back to the doctors, and the doctors couldn't believe it. They said, "We have no explanation for this. We completely knew that she was dying. We don't understand this, but evidently she doesn't have hepatitis anymore." They ran tests on me, and my liver function was completely normal. So when my mother told me this story that she had never told me my whole life, I started to put two and two together, and I was like, oh my goodness, that's what happened to me. I was in heaven. At that moment was when I died, and I visited the throne room of God, and I saw God and Jesus on their thrones. And evidently, Jesus knew that the nuns were praying for me and heard my mom's prayers and her crying out to God not to take me. And that's when he pointed and said, "Go. You're not supposed to be here. You can't stay here. Go back." So that was my near-death experience at age 2.